Have you ever wondered why a car built in 3 weeks for a TV show became one of the most iconic vehicles in entertainment history? What if I told you that the 1966 Batmobile, that sleek symbol of superhero cool, was actually a recycled concept car held together with fiberglass and hope? Today we're counting down the 10 most shocking truths about the original Batmobile that even die-hard Batman fans might not know. From exploding engines to actors literally baking inside the cockpit, these revelations will change how you see this legendary machine forever. So, buckle up, because this ride gets wild. Number 10, the $1 Wonder. Here's something that'll blow your mind. The 1966 Batmobile, one of the most valuable TV cars ever created, started life as a $1 purchase. Well, reportedly, $1. George Barris, the legendary car customizer, claimed he bought the Lincoln Futura concept car from Ford for exactly $1, one single dollar. Now, whether that's completely accurate or Hollywood myth-making is up for debate, but here's what we know for sure. The Futura was a 1955 concept car that Ford had spent around $250,000 creating. That's over $2 million in today's money. It was hand-built by Ghia in Italy, shipped to America, toured the auto show circuit, and even starred in a 1959 movie called It Started With a Kiss, alongside Glenn Ford and Debbie Reynolds. By 1965, this $250,000 show car was just taking up space in Barris's shop. Ford couldn't sell it as a real car. They couldn't really do anything with it. So when ABC came calling, needing a Batmobile for their new Batman series, Barris remembered this futuristic-looking concept car gathering dust. The network gave him just 3 weeks to create something extraordinary. 3 weeks. To build what would become one of the most famous cars in television history. The transformation was insane. Barris and his team worked around the clock, adding the distinctive bat nose, those iconic rear fins, and all the crime-fighting gadgets that would make kids across America lose their minds. They painted it gloss black with fluorescent red pinstripes that would pop on color television. Remember, color TV was still pretty new in 1966. The stripes had to be that eye-searing orange-red to register properly on those primitive color sets. But here's the really wild part. After the show ended, Barris kept ownership of the car for decades. He displayed it, licensed it, made money from it for almost 50 years. Then, in 2013, he finally decided to sell. The car went up for auction at Barrett-Jackson in Scottsdale, Arizona. The winning bid, $4.62 million, that's a pretty impressive return on a $1 investment. Even if the original price was actually higher, say a few $1,000s, that's still one of the greatest automotive investments in history. From concept car to TV star to multi-million-dollar collectible. Not bad for something that started as Ford's expensive experiment that nobody knew what to do with. Number 9, the 3-week miracle. Imagine being told you have 3 weeks to build the most famous car in television history. Not 3 months, not 3 years. 3 weeks. That's exactly what happened to George Barris in late 1965. ABC had greenlit Batman, they were ready to start filming, and they needed their hero car yesterday. The pressure was absolutely crushing. Barris later described it as the most intense build of his career. His team worked 20-hour days. They slept in the shop. They literally lived and breathed Batmobile for those 3 weeks. The biggest challenge wasn't even the cosmetic transformation. It was making everything look functional and believable on camera while actually being safe enough for actors to use. Think about what they had to accomplish. They needed to extend the nose into that distinctive bat shape. They had to fabricate those massive rear fins. The bubble canopies had to open and close smoothly. All those gadgets, the bat phone, the detectascope, the bat ray projector, they all had to at least look like they worked. And everything had to be sturdy enough to survive multiple takes, different shooting locations, and the general abuse of television production. The time crunch led to some creative solutions. Instead of building everything from scratch, they raided aircraft surplus stores for gauges and switches. They repurposed parts from other cars. The famous rocket exhaust tube was actually a 5-gallon paint can. The detectascope was made from pieces of a hairdryer. It was pure Hollywood magic, making ordinary objects look extraordinary. The really amazing thing is that it worked. When the Batmobile rolled onto set for the first time, everyone was blown away. It looked like something from the future, or maybe from a billionaire's garage. Nobody could tell it had been thrown together in less than a month. Even today, knowing how quickly it was built, the car still looks impressive. Those 3 weeks in 1965 created an icon that's lasted almost 60 years. Most custom car builds today, with all our modern tools and technology, take months or even years. Barris did it in 3 weeks with basically hand tools and determination. That's not just impressive, that's borderline impossible. Number 8. The Flame-Throwing Beast. Let's talk about that rocket exhaust because this is where things get genuinely dangerous. That flame shooting out the back of the Batmobile? Totally real. Not special effects, not camera tricks, real fire, real propane, real possibility of everything going horribly wrong. Barris rigged up a propane system that fed directly through the car's exhaust system. When activated, it would shoot a massive jet of flame out the back, creating that iconic afterburner effect whenever Batman needed to make a dramatic exit. The flame could extend up to 6 feet behind the car, 6 feet of actual fire, on a television set. In the 1960s, when safety regulations were basically suggestions, the system was surprisingly complex for something built in such a hurry. There was a separate fuel tank hidden in the trunk, special plumbing ran alongside the regular exhaust, a hidden switch on the dashboard controlled the whole thing. When the driver, or more accurately the stunt driver, hit that switch, propane would flow through the system, hit the hot exhaust, and whoosh, instant rocket car. But here's what's really insane, they use this effect constantly. Not just for special episodes or big stunts, regular exits from the Batcave, pulling away from crime scenes, racing through Gotham's streets. Each time they were basically setting off a controlled explosion behind a car worth more than most houses. The insurance company must have had nightmares. The stunt drivers who operated the flame system had nerves of steel. One misfire, one leak in the system, one problem with the propane tank, and you've got a disaster. Remember, this car had a fiberglass body in many places. The fuel tank was right there, the actors were sometimes nearby. It's miraculous that nothing serious ever went wrong. Adam West later talked about how the flame effect would sometimes malfunction. Not in a dangerous way, thankfully, but in embarrassing ways. Sometimes it wouldn't light at all, ruining a dramatic exit. Other times, it would keep burning after it was supposed to stop, leaving a trail of fire behind the car like some kind of demonic ice cream truck. The crew would have to quickly extinguish it before they burned down the set. The flame-throwing Batmobile was one of the most memorable aspects of the show, but it was also one of the most genuinely risky. Today's health and safety inspectors would have shut down production immediately. Number 7. The Fake Gadget Paradise. Every kid who watched Batman wanted to play with those amazing Batmobile gadgets. The Batcomputer, the Batscope, the Bat-Ray, the emergency Bat turn lever, the anti-theft device, the Bat phone. It was a rolling arsenal of crime-fighting technology, except none of it actually worked. Not a single thing. It was all complete nonsense. Those switches and buttons that Adam West pressed with such authority, they weren't connected to anything. Most of them were literally glued onto the dashboard. The ones that did move were connected to little lights that would blink, and that was about it. The famous Batcomputer was just random aircraft surplus gauges with labels stuck on them. The detectoscope that would pop up dramatically was operated by a crew member with a fishing line. Pure theater. The Bat phone was probably the most elaborate fake. It looked impressive sitting there in its special cradle, ready for emergency calls from Commissioner Gordon. In reality, it was a regular Western electric phone with the dial removed. When they needed it to ring for a scene, a prop master would literally shake a bell off camera. When Adam West answered it, he was talking to nobody. All his conversations were one-sided performances. Even the famous chain cutter on the front was mostly for show. It could spin, sure, but it couldn't actually cut anything tougher than tissue paper. The producers tried to make it functional for one episode, but it was too dangerous and too expensive. So they stuck with the spinning but useless version and used camera tricks to make it look effective. The anti-theft device was particularly funny. In the show, it would electrocute anyone who tried to steal the Batmobile. In reality, it was just a label, though apparently the car was actually stolen once during production, which proves that even fake anti-theft devices don't work if they're fake enough. But here's the genius part. Because everything was fake, nothing could really break. They didn't have to worry about complex electronics failing or expensive equipment needing repair. If a switch stopped working, they'd just glue on a new one. If a light burned out, they'd replace it with whatever was handy. It was the perfect solution for a show that needed to film quickly and cheaply. The illusion was what mattered, not the reality. And for millions of viewers, the illusion was perfect. Number 5, the Overheating Nightmare. Here's something they never showed on TV. The Batmobile was basically undrivable for more than a few minutes at a time. This legendary crime-fighting machine would overheat faster than a pizza oven in Phoenix. We're talking about a car that would literally steam and smoke after just a short drive, and not in the cool, dramatic way. The problem started with the original Lincoln Futura design. It was never meant to be a practical car. It was a show car, designed to look amazing sitting still at auto exhibitions. Ford never intended for anyone to actually drive it regularly. The cooling system was an afterthought. Then Barris added all that extra bodywork, those massive fins, that extended nose, all of which trapped heat like a greenhouse. The engine, a big Lincoln V8, was already running hot in its original configuration, but now it was wrapped in layers of fiberglass and steel, with minimal airflow. The radiator couldn't keep up, the water pump was inadequate. On a warm day in Southern California, which was basically every day they filmed, the temperature gauge would spike into the red zone within minutes. The crew developed elaborate workarounds. They would only run the car for the absolute minimum time needed for each shot. Between takes, they'd immediately shut off the engine and open the hood. They had industrial fans ready to blow air through the engine compartment. Sometimes they'd pack bags of ice around the engine block. It was ridiculous. For longer driving sequences, they'd use multiple cars and switch them out. They'd film one shot, let that car cool down while they used another, then switch back. What looked like a continuous chase scene was actually filmed in tiny segments over hours or even days. The actors suffered too. The cockpit would heat up like a sauna. The floor would get so hot you could barely touch it. Adam West and Burt Ward would be drenched in sweat after just a few minutes of filming. The overheating problem got so bad that they eventually had to modify the cars with additional cooling vents, electric fans, and even external cooling systems that could be hooked up between shots. But nothing really solved the problem. The Batmobile remained a beautiful, iconic, constantly overheating nightmare throughout the entire run of the show. It's actually impressive that they managed to make it look so cool and capable on screen, when in reality, it could barely make it around the block without turning into a steam engine. Number 4. The brake system from hell. Want to know a terrifying secret about the Batmobile? It basically couldn't stop. Oh, it had brakes. They just didn't work very well. Imagine driving a 3-ton missile with the stopping power of a shopping cart. That's what stunt drivers dealt with every single day on the Batman set. The original Lincoln Futura had drum brakes from 1955. These were already outdated by 1966 when the show was filming. Drum brakes on a normal 1955 car were barely adequate, but the Batmobile wasn't a normal car anymore. It was significantly heavier thanks to all the added bodywork, gadgets, and that massive steel frame. The brake problem was so severe that many of the show's dramatic stops were actually carefully choreographed illusions. When you see the Batmobile screech to a halt outside Gotham City Police Headquarters, what you're really seeing is a car moving at maybe 5 miles per hour, with sound effects added later to make it seem faster. Those dramatic sliding stops, usually filmed at extremely low speeds and then sped up in editing. Stunt drivers had to plan every stop well in advance. They'd start braking hundreds of feet before they needed to stop. Even then, it was dicey. There are stories from the set about the Batmobile rolling past its mark and into equipment, through set walls, and once, allegedly, into a catering table. The poor guy operating the craft services must have had a heart attack watching the Batmobile bearing down on his sandwich station. The brake situation got so bad that for Season 2 they tried to upgrade the system, but the car's unique construction made it nearly impossible to retrofit modern brakes without completely rebuilding the chassis. So they just lived with it, using camera tricks and very careful driving to hide the problem. This is why Adam West rarely actually drove the car. It wasn't just insurance concerns or star protection. The car was genuinely dangerous to operate. Professional stunt. Drivers who knew the car's limitations and could compensate for the terrible brakes did most of the actual driving. West would sit behind the wheel for close-ups and dialogue scenes, but when the Batmobile needed to actually move with any speed, a professional took over. The miracle is that they never had a serious accident. 3 tons of barely controlled Bat-themed steel rolling through studio lots and location shoots with brakes that belonged in a museum. It's both terrifying and impressive. Number 3. The Bubble Canopy Torture Chamber. Those iconic bubble canopies that gave the Batmobile its futuristic look, they were basically transparent torture devices. In the California sun, they turned the cockpit into a mobile greenhouse that would have violated the Geneva Convention if it had been used on prisoners. The canopies were made of plexiglass, which looks great but has zero UV protection and acts like a magnifying glass for heat. Within minutes of sitting in direct sunlight, the interior temperature would soar past 100 degrees. After an hour, it could hit 130. The black interior absorbed every bit of heat and radiated it back at the occupants. Adam West and Burt Ward suffered constantly. Their costumes were already hot, made of thick fabric with capes that didn't breathe. Add the greenhouse effect of the canopies, and they were basically wearing winter clothes in a sauna. The makeup department had to constantly touch up their faces because they'd sweat through everything within minutes. But the heat was only part of the problem. The canopies would fog up constantly from the actors' breathing and perspiration. The crew tried various anti-fog treatments, but nothing really worked. So they installed small electric fans inside the cockpit, but these were loud and would get picked up by the microphones. They'd have to turn them off during dialogue scenes, which meant the actors would start suffocating again. The canopies also had a tendency to stick closed when they got hot. The plexiglass would expand in the heat and jam against the frame. There are multiple stories about Adam West being literally trapped inside the Batmobile, pounding on the canopy while crew members tried to pry it open with crowbars. Imagine being stuck in a 130-degree oven wearing a batsuit. That's not method acting, that's survival. For many shots, they simply remove the canopies entirely. If you watch the show carefully, you'll notice the canopies mysteriously disappear and reappear between shots. Any scene where they could get away with it, off came the bubbles. But for those iconic shots of the Batmobile racing through Gotham, the actors had to suffer. The producers eventually had special canopies made with small ventilation holes, but these were barely noticeable and didn't help much. They also tried tinting them slightly, but this made the car look different on camera, and it was abandoned. In the end, they just accepted that the Batmobile's cockpit was going to be miserable and tried to minimize the time anyone had to spend inside it. Those cool bubble canopies that every kid wanted on their imaginary Batmobile were actually one of the worst features of the real thing. Number 2, the stunt double secret. Here's something that might shatter your childhood. Adam West almost never actually drove the Batmobile during action scenes. That wasn't Batman behind the wheel during those exciting chases. It was usually a professional stunt driver named Hubie Kearns, sometimes wearing a spare cowl to maintain the illusion. The insurance situation alone made it impossible for West to do any real driving. He was the star of a major network TV show. If he got injured in a car accident, production would shut down. Millions of dollars would be lost. So except for very simple, very slow scenes, West was strictly a passenger or only behind the wheel when the car was stationary. But it went deeper than just insurance. The Batmobile was genuinely difficult to drive. The visibility was terrible. You couldn't see over that long nose. The side visibility was blocked by the fins and bodywork. The bubble canopy distorted everything. Backing up was nearly impossible. You were essentially driving blind half the time. The car's handling was also bizarre. It had the wheelbase of a 1955 Lincoln, but the weight distribution was completely different with all the added bodywork. It would understeer horribly in turns. The steering was heavy and vague. The throttle response was unpredictable. Professional stunt drivers who drove everything from motorcycles to tanks said the Batmobile was one of the most challenging vehicles they'd ever operated. Hubie Kearns became so associated with driving the Batmobile that he developed specific techniques for making it look good on camera. He figured out exactly how much throttle to give it for the perfect wheel spin. He knew how to slide it through the corners without actually losing control. He could make it look fast when it was actually crawling along at 20 miles per hour. The really clever part was how they filmed around this limitation. They'd shoot Adam West in close-up sitting in a stationary Batmobile with the background projected behind him. Then they'd cut to a wide shot of Kearns actually driving. Back to West for dialogue, back to Kearns for action. With quick editing and matching costumes, viewers never noticed the switch. There's actually footage from behind the scenes where you can see how they did it. West would climb out, Kearns would climb in, they'd film the driving portion, then switch back. Sometimes they wouldn't even bother with the full costume change. Kearns would just wear the cowl and gloves, since that's all you could see through the canopy anyway. It was an elaborate dance that happened for nearly every episode. The illusion of Batman driving his amazing car was maintained by a team of professionals making it look effortless. Number 1, the multi-million-dollar survivor. Here's the ultimate truth about the 1966 Batmobile. Despite everything, the overheating, the bad brakes, the torture chamber cockpit, the 3-week build time, despite all of it, this car became immortal. And not just culturally immortal, financially immortal. When the original Batmobile, the number 1 hero car, went to auction in 2013, experts predicted it might sell for $2 million. Maybe $3 million if bidding got heated. What happened next shocked everyone. The bidding exploded. Collectors from around the world jumped in. The price climbed past $3 million, past $4 million. When the hammer finally fell, the winning bid was $4.62 million. $4.62 million for a car that could barely drive around the block without overheating, for a vehicle built in 3 weeks from a discarded concept car, for something that was essentially an elaborate prop held together with fiberglass and determination. But here's what that buyer understood. They weren't just buying a car. They were buying a piece of American cultural history. Every kid who grew up in the 60s and 70s wanted this car. Every adult who remembered rushing home from school to watch Batman understood its value. This wasn't just transportation, this was childhood dreams made real. The car's influence extends far beyond its auction price. Every Batmobile since, from the militaristic Tumbler to the gothic Tim Burton versions, they all reference the original. When people think Batmobile, they think of this one first. The fins, the bubble canopy, the atomic batteries, the turbines, power. This is the template. George Barris, who passed away in 2015, lived to see his 3-week rush job become one of the most valuable cars in the world. He often said it was his greatest creation, even though he'd built cars for everyone from Elvis to John Wayne. Nothing matched the cultural impact of the Batmobile. Today, the original sits in a private collection, occasionally appearing at special events. The other surviving Barris-built copies tour museums and car shows, still drawing crowds 50 years later. Kids who weren't even born when the show aired still drop their jaws when they see it. Because despite all its flaws, despite all its problems, despite being a rushed TV prop that could barely function as an actual car, the 1966 Batmobile achieved something almost impossible. It became larger than life. It became mythology. It became the car every superhero vehicle is measured against. Not bad for something that started as a $1 purchase and 3 weeks of panic. And there you have it. That's 10 shocking truths about the 1966 Batmobile that prove sometimes the most iconic things are held together with little more than imagination and propane. Did any of these revelations surprise you? Did we miss your favorite piece of Batmobile trivia? Let us know in the comments below. And be honest, you still want one, don't you? Even knowing it might burst into flames or trap you inside. Since you made it this far, hit that subscribe button for more deep dives into TV history's most legendary vehicles and the surprising stories behind them. Until next time, same bat channel.